I was quietly stirring a simmering pot of homemade vegetable soup when my sister-in-law, Victoria, snatched the hot stainless steel handle right out of my bare hands with violent disdain. The scalding broth splashed violently across the sensitive skin of my wrist, a sharp, searing heat blossoming instantly. Yet I refused to let out a single cry or reveal my pain. At 27 years old, as a licensed architectural designer standing in the sunlit kitchen of the 3-bedroom suburban home that I had single-handedly paid off through 5 grueling years of relentless labor, I stood frozen as Victoria glared at me with an arrogance that had gradually turned my sanctuary into a prison. Who even cooks like this anymore? You are completely useless, Maya, she shrieked, her high-pitched voice dripping with that cruel condescension I had slowly learned to dread more than total silence. Victoria was 29, possessing an air of unearned entitlement, her manicured fingers pointing aggressively at the kitchen counter as she continued her vicious tirade about my seasoning, my housekeeping, and what a pathetic, freeloading burden I allegedly was under what she boldly claimed was her roof. Her house. Those two bitter, toxic words sliced through my chest like a jagged shard of glass, just as they had done every day since she moved in 6 months ago. Yet, despite the fiery burn blistering my wrist and the humiliation suffocating the room, I did not utter a single word of defense, maintaining an unshakable composure as I drew in a deep, measured breath. 10 feet away, in the adjoining living room, my 31-year-old brother, Ethan, sat deeply sunken into the oversized leather armchair our late father had cherished, his eyes glued firmly to the glowing television screen. Instead of standing up to defend his younger sister or asking if my burned wrist was all right, Ethan reached for the remote control and deliberately turned up the volume, drowning out Victoria's shrill insults with the mindless noise of a commercial. He chose to pretend he heard nothing at all, burying his head in the sand, just as he had done every single day since he returned to Denver broken and bankrupt. Watching my own flesh and blood deliberately ignore my physical pain and emotional degradation cut deeper than any scalding liquid ever could, rotting something sacred from the inside out. I did not shed a single tear, nor did I allow my hands to shake. My body had already paid a heavy price for every quiet humiliation endured within these sacred walls. As I walked slowly away from the stove, my footsteps echoed softly against the dark hardwood floors, while I approached the tall cedar cabinet, standing solemnly in the corner of the formal dining room. This cabinet belonged to my late mother, housing her most cherished possessions, holding the living memory of a family that once knew how to love honorably. Opening its carved wooden doors with quiet reverence, I looked at the heirloom treasures inside, knowing that the time for silent endurance had finally passed. Reaching into the deep front pocket of my linen apron, my fingers silently pressed the record button on a concealed digital audio recorder, ensuring that every sound, every cruel insult, and every crashing moment would be captured with crystalline clarity for the future. With measured, deliberate grace, I reached into the upper shelf of the cedar cabinet and pulled out the entire heavy stack of antique Limoges porcelain dinnerware, a breathtaking, gold-trimmed set appraised at $25,000, representing the most prized ancestral heirloom passed down through 3 generations of Miller women. Holding the towering stack in my arms, I turned around to face the kitchen doorway, where Victoria stood, her mouth agape in sudden, stunned bewilderment. "What are you doing, you crazy little girl?" Victoria barked, her voice suddenly laced with a subtle flicker of genuine uncertainty as she stared at the fragile porcelain trembling slightly in my hands. I offered no verbal explanation, nor did I blink under her hostile gaze. Instead, holding the living legacy of my family's heritage with absolute intention, I simply opened my hands and let the entire $25,000 collection fall freely toward the hard ceramic tile floor below. The resulting explosion of sound was magnificent and cathartic, a thunderous, metallic shatter that sounded as though 5 years of buried grief, hidden tears, and silent sacrifices were fracturing all at once into 1,000 sparkling, irreplaceable pieces across the kitchen floor, setting my long-imprisoned spirit completely free from her emotional oppression. The deafening shatter echoed through the open floor plan like a gunshot, scattering golden-trimmed porcelain fragments across the dark tile like dirty, frozen snow. Victoria shrieked in absolute terror, staggering backward against the kitchen island counter, her face turning pale before flushing red with uncontrollable rage. "You insane, unhinged bitch!" Victoria screamed at the top of her lungs, her composure completely shattering as she gestured wildly at the destruction. "Look at what you did! You just destroyed my house and my family's property!" Ethan came running out of the living room, his eyes wide with shock, his breath catching in his throat as he froze in the doorway, staring in utter disbelief at the glittering sea of sharp ceramic shards surrounding my feet. For the first time in 3 years, my brother looked at me with a sudden, piercing flicker of genuine fear, realizing that the quiet, compliant sister he had taken for granted was no longer there to be walked upon. I stepped carefully over the sharp pieces, standing tall amidst the ruins of our ancestral porcelain, and met Ethan's gaze with a diamond-hard, unshakable calm that radiated pure authority throughout the room. "If everything I do in my parents' home is useless, Ethan," I stated softly, my voice smooth, quiet, and carrying an iron edge that cut through the quiet room like a razor, "then nothing in this house matters anymore, does it?" The heavy, suffocating silence that followed was far more powerful than any shriek. To understand why I allowed $25,000 of priceless heirloom porcelain to shatter without blinking on that fateful afternoon, you must travel back 5 years to the rainy, tragic afternoon when our entire world collapsed. Our beloved parents were killed instantly in a devastating car accident on a slick Colorado highway, leaving 22-year-old me and 26-year-old Ethan utterly orphaned in an instant. They left behind this 3-bedroom home, buried beneath a crushing $200,000 mortgage that threatened to foreclose within a few short months of their funeral. While Ethan panicked and fled to California to pursue lavish, irresponsible business ventures, refusing to carry the heavy burden of our parents' legacy, I refused to let the ground beneath our family vanish into thin air. Fresh out of college, I threw myself into the brutal world of architectural design, working grueling 70-hour weeks, taking on freelance drafting late at night, and surviving on cheap instant noodles, while every single dollar I earned went straight toward paying down the bank debt. For 5 long years, while Ethan lived recklessly and avoided responsibility, I sacrificed my youth, my social life, and my physical health until I finally paid off the very last cent of that $200,000 mortgage, securing the legal deed solely in my own name. I had built this sanctuary with my sweat, blood, and tears, and standing among the porcelain dust, I vowed that no parasitic intruder would ever steal my parents' legacy again. It had all begun 6 long months earlier, on a crisp, golden autumn Saturday, when Ethan arrived at my doorstep, completely unannounced, looking hollowed out and utterly desperate, accompanied by Victoria. Dressed in a wrinkled suit, with dark circles hanging heavily beneath his tired eyes, my brother spun a harrowing, elaborate story of financial ruin, claiming he had been ruthlessly scammed out of his entire $250,000 savings by an unscrupulous business partner named Julian Cross. Victoria stood closely beside him, clutching his arm in a tightly fitted mustard-colored sweater, her calculated eyes glistening with rehearsed tears as she offered a sweet, saccharine smile and promised that they only needed remembering the boy who used to share his school lunch with me when we were children, and completely blind to the calculating malice hidden behind Victoria's polished facade, I opened my front doors wide without a single second of hesitation. Stay, I had told them warmly, offering the sanctuary of my home with an open, loving heart, entirely unaware that I was inviting a pair of hungry wolves into the very home I had spent 5 agonizing years building with my sweat. What I naively believed to be an act of unconditional sisterly love was, in unvarnished reality, the opening scene of an elaborate, predatory trap designed to consume everything my parents had left behind. Within 2 short weeks of moving into my home, suitcase after heavy cardboard box, their subtle encroachment upon my personal space transformed into an overt, systematic invasion. Victoria and Ethan immediately claimed the spacious master bedroom, the sacred sanctuary where my late parents had shared 25 years of quiet, devoted marriage, reasoning with smooth arrogance that Ethan needed the extra space for his home computer business setup. I quietly relocated my personal belongings down to the drafty guest bedroom facing the damp backyard, trying to persuade myself that my physical discomfort was merely a temporary, noble sacrifice for my brother's financial recovery. But Victoria's ruthless ambition did not stop at the bedroom doorway. She quickly began systematically erasing every physical trace of my parents' loving presence from the entire house. She tore down the ivory linen curtains my mother had hand-stitched during her pregnancy, replacing them with cold, industrial, metallic gray drapes that blocked out the warm morning sunlight. The cherished gold-framed photographs of our family vacations, our high school graduations, and my father's gentle smile were unceremoniously removed from the living room walls, discarded into dusty storage boxes, and replaced by soulless, cheap abstract canvas prints she purchased on clearance sale.
"We need to modernize this depressing place, Maya," Victoria would remark with a sharp, patronizing laugh that felt like a slap across my face. "It feels like living in an old museum in here." I swallowed my rising grief in absolute silence, falsely convincing myself that material objects did not matter, as long as my brother was safe. As the months dragged on into a dark nightmare, Victoria's passive encroachment hardened into an overt, tyrannical regime that reduced my daily existence to that of an unappreciated, unpaid servant in my own home. That under the flimsy guise of saving money on utility bills, she strictly forbade me from using the washing machine, forcing me to kneel before a plastic wash basin on the chilly concrete patio to hand wash her designer jeans and my brother's clothes until my knuckles cracked and bled in the cold autumn air. Until my knuckles cracked and bled in the cold autumn air. She imposed strict time limits on my evening showers, claiming I consumed too much hot water, and restricted my access to the kitchen while she prepared organic meals purchased with money I never saw. Whenever Victoria hosted her wealthy social acquaintances for evening cocktail parties, she explicitly banned me from stepping foot into the living room, whispering cruelly that my quiet, grieving presence was far too gloomy, and that I smelled subtly like an old, unwashed house. On one particularly humiliating occasion, Victoria went so far as to turn the key in my bedroom lock from the outside during a dinner party she organized, locking me inside for 3 agonizing hours while laughter floated through the door. When she finally unlocked it afterward, with a casual, insincere apology, claiming she had simply forgotten I was inside, I realized that her cruelty was not accidental. It was a deliberate, methodical campaign designed to break my spirit, erode my self-worth, and force me out of my own sacred home forever. Cornering Ethan alone in the hallway one evening, after he emerged from the bathroom, smelling of expensive cologne they bought with stolen funds, I attempted to shatter his willful blindness and appeal to his dormant conscience. "Ethan, we need to talk. Right now," I demanded, my voice trembling with suppressed emotion as I stood firmly in his path. "Victoria is treating me like a complete stranger in my own home. She insults me, locks me in my room, and treats me like an unpaid servant." Ethan rubbed his face with a heavy, irritated sigh, refusing to meet my eyes as he backed away toward his bedroom door. "Don't complicate things, Maya," he snapped sharply, his tone laced with a defensive, cruel dismissiveness that shattered what little hope I had left in my chest. "I am the eldest son in this family, and Victoria is just trying to bring some necessary order to her household. You are young, naive, and clearly emotionally unstable from overworking yourself. If living here is so unbearable for you, maybe you should just move out and rent a small apartment downtown." "Her household?" I repeated, breathless with shock, feeling the floor drop out beneath my feet. "This is my house, Ethan. I worked 70 hours a week for 5 long years to pay off the mortgage." He merely shrugged his shoulders, brushed past me, and slammed the bedroom door in my face, leaving me standing alone in the dark hallway, weeping silently over the brother I had officially lost to an evil parasite. The absolute culmination of their betrayal surfaced 3 weeks later, while I was searching through my late father's heavy mahogany desk for an elusive water bill that Victoria claimed I had misplaced. Deep inside the bottom drawer, hidden beneath a stack of dusty tax folders, my fingers brushed against a thick manila legal file. Opening it with trembling hands, the world around me ground to a sudden, terrifying halt. Inside were notarized deeds, legal affidavits, and fraudulent psychiatric evaluations signed by an unknown doctor, falsely declaring that 27-year-old Maya Miller suffered from progressive cognitive decline and severe mental incompetence. Victoria and Ethan were actively fabricating a legal case to declare me unfit to manage my own affairs, aiming to legally seize the house deed straight from my hands. Tucked into the back of the folder was a recent bank statement for the joint emergency account my father had set up for us before his death, which had originally held $380,000 of life insurance capital. The current balance read less than $12,000. My brother and his wife had covertly drained over $370,000 to fund their lavish lifestyle, while treating me like a beggar in my own home. Collapsing into my father's leather chair, tears streaming down my face, the crushing grief finally transformed into a cold, diamond-sharp rage. They believed they had completely destroyed me, entirely unaware that they had just awakened a sleeping warrior who was ready to reclaim her life. Sitting on the cold, hardwood floor beside my father's heavy mahogany desk, holding the undeniable documentary evidence of my brother's ultimate betrayal, I did not allow myself to collapse or shed another helpless tear. With slow, methodical precision, I folded each fraudulent psychiatric report along its original creases, returning the thick manila folder to its exact hiding place beneath the dusty tax records, before sliding the mahogany drawer quietly shut. The suffocating terror that had paralyzed my chest for months dissolved into thin air, replaced by a cold, crystal-clear rage that burned with the unwavering intensity of a quiet flame. I looked around the sunlit study at my father's leather-bound architectural books and my mother's cherished botanical prints, realizing that my silent endurance had never been an act of noble love. It had merely empowered two ruthless parasites to systematically dismantle my family's legacy. For 5 agonizing years, I had poured my youth, my physical health, and my soul into earning every single brick of this 3-bedroom home, and I was completely done apologizing for my own existence or playing the helpless victim in my own life story. Rising steadily to my feet, I felt an unshakable sense of clarity settle over my spirit as I smoothed down my linen apron and looked into the oval mirror, catching the reflection of a woman who was no longer afraid of the dark. The days of submissive silence were officially over. I was going to fight for my dignity, reclaim my parents' memory, and take back everything that belonged to me. The following afternoon, while Victoria was out indulging at an expensive day spa funded by my stolen money, I sat on my bed and dialed Phoenix, Arizona. On the second ring, a familiar, commanding voice answered. Aunt Clara Sterling, my late mother's 58-year-old sister and a formidable, highly respected estate attorney who tolerated zero foolishness in life or law. As I recounted the harrowing nightmare of the past 6 months through quiet, steady breaths, the stolen $370,000, the forged psychiatric evaluations, and the daily degradation, a heavy, dangerous silence fell over the phone line. Listen to me very carefully, Maya Miller, Aunt Clara declared, her sharp, ironclad tone vibrating through the receiver like a rallying battle cry. You are the brilliant, courageous woman who worked grueling 70-hour weeks to pay off a $200,000 mortgage in your own name. You built that sanctuary with your own blood, sweat, and tears, and you will not allow a pair of greedy, manipulative parasites to erase your parents' hard work or steal your rightful birthright. Aunt Clara promised to immediately pull legal strings, hire trusted local private investigators, and prepare an ironclad defense, instructing me to remain absolutely calm, leave the dark file untouched as primary evidence, and begin secretly recording every single interaction within that house. Hearing her fierce, unwavering belief in my strength rekindled a blazing fire in my soul, reminding me that I was never truly alone in this fight, and that the Miller legacy was worth fighting for with everything I possessed. To build an unassailable mountain of legal evidence, I turned to the one person in Denver I trusted with my life, my 25-year-old best friend, Chloe Bennett, a brilliant cybersecurity specialist who lived just 3 blocks away. That evening, under the cover of dusk, Chloe arrived at my side door carrying a heavy black duffel bag packed with state-of-the-art surveillance equipment. Her brown eyes burned with fierce indignation as I explained Victoria's psychological abuse, and without missing a single beat, she took charge of transforming my home into an invisible intelligence network. Over 2 meticulous hours, Chloe expertly installed microscopic, motion-activated cameras inside the antique wooden mantel clock in the living room, the porcelain flower vase on the dining table, and a decorative picture frame lining the hallway. She then sat beside me on my twin bed, downloading a stealthy, voice-activated recording application onto my smartphone that could be instantly triggered by a subtle double tap on the side button, even while tucked deeply inside my apron pocket. When that viper insults you or threatens your sanity, Maya, just double tap your phone and let her dig her own legal grave, Chloe instructed with a grim, determined smile as she squeezed my hands tightly in solidarity. We are going to capture every single word, every cruel laugh, and every illegal threat until we have enough undeniable ammunition to utterly destroy her in a court of law and protect your parents' legacy forever. For the next 3 grueling weeks, I became a consummate, flawless actress within the walls of my own home, concealing my newfound resolve beneath a mask of quiet, submissive obedience. Every morning at 6 o'clock, I rose before anyone else, prepared elaborate breakfasts, hand-washed heavy clothes, and quietly endured Victoria's sharp, condescending insults with my head bowed and my eyes cast toward the floor. But beneath my linen apron,
My hidden smartphone recorder quietly captured every vicious tirade, every mockingly cruel remark about my mental stability, and every arrogant demand for my total compliance. The hidden micro cameras picked up crystal clear video footage of Victoria tossing my mother's cherished heirloom knickknacks into trash bags, shouting at me for imaginary housekeeping errors, and openly discussing her plans to force me out of my own home. Ethan remained utterly passive throughout, recorded on tape turning away while his wife humiliated his younger sister, providing undeniable proof of his complicity in her emotional abuse. With every cruel insult I swallowed and every humiliating task I performed without complaint, I felt no sadness or shame. Instead, I felt the quiet satisfaction of a patient hunter laying an inescapable trap for a predator. Each recorded file was automatically backed up to Chloe's secure cloud server, building a damning, airtight dossier of emotional abuse, financial coercion, and psychological warfare that no high-priced defense attorney could ever explain away or dispute in court during a trial. The ultimate breakthrough occurred on a rainy Tuesday night around 2 a.m, when the house was draped in absolute silence and dark shadow. Woken by a faint sound, I crept silently down the carpeted hallway in my socks, catching the low, intimate murmur of a voice coming from the cracked doorway of the master bedroom. Realizing Ethan was away on an overnight business trip, I activated my phone's audio recorder, pressed my ear close to the wood, and held my breath. Victoria was on the phone, her voice dripping with a sultry, affectionate warmth I had never heard her use with my brother. "Don't be so impatient, my love. Everything is moving perfectly on schedule," Victoria purred softly into the receiver, laughing a cold, chilling laugh that sent shivers down my spine. "The fake psychiatric reports are finalized, and the lawyer says we will have Maya declared incompetent and the house title transferred within a month. Ethan is such an oblivious, useful idiot. He actually thinks I'm doing all this to secure our joint future." My heart hammered against my ribs as she continued. "As soon as the deed is signed solely over to my name, I'm filing for divorce, liquidating the property, and meeting you at the airport so we can fly straight to Miami with the cash, Julian." Hearing her openly detail her conspiracy with Julian Cross to destroy both my brother and me provided the final, fatal piece of evidence I needed to dismantle her entire life. The calendar soon marked October 24th, my 27th birthday, a bittersweet milestone that had passed in complete, lonely silence ever since my beloved parents' tragic passing 5 years ago. I expected absolutely nothing from my family, having long grown accustomed to existing as an invisible, unappreciated ghost within my own home. But Victoria suddenly surprised everyone by announcing that morning that she was hosting an intimate birthday dinner in my honor. Her calculated eyes sparkled with a sugary, deceitful enthusiasm that instantly alerted every protective instinct within my body. Yet I offered a polite, gentle smile and quietly accepted the gesture. As the afternoon unfolded, however, her true motives became glaringly obvious. Victoria was simply using my milestone birthday as a convenient, glamorous pretext to throw a lavish cocktail party using money stolen directly from my family's savings account. She spent the entire day issuing sharp, condescending orders, forcing me to clean the house from top to bottom, polish the antique silverware, and scrub the kitchen floors until my back burned with searing exhaustion. By 7 o'clock that evening, the living room filled with her wealthy, superficial socialite friends, her arrogant relatives, and a sleek, smug 32-year-old man named Julian Cross, the very partner who had allegedly scammed my brother out of his life savings. Not a single person from my actual life was invited. Neither my architectural colleagues nor my best friend Chloe. I was merely a convenient prop at my own party, an afterthought, brought out to justify Victoria's extravagant, stolen spending. Sitting quietly at the far end of the formal dining table, relegated to the least important seat, while Victoria presided like a triumphant queen over my late mother's embroidered linen tablecloth, I calmly observed the cruel spectacle unfolding around me. Guests devoured gourmet restaurant catering, paid for with my stolen life insurance funds, washing it down with expensive vintage wine, completely oblivious to the fact that they were sitting in a home paid for by my sweat and tears. Halfway through the elaborate meal, Victoria tapped her crystal wine glass with a silver fork to command attention, announcing radiant news that she and Ethan were commencing a complete modern architectural renovation of the property next month. We're throwing away all those dusty architectural antiques and depressing family photographs, Victoria proclaimed with a patronizing, melodic laugh, gesturing toward my parents' cherished heirlooms hanging on the walls. Maya lives in a depressing, unhealthy past, and honestly, at her age, with her emotional instability, she needs to learn to detach from material things. Julian Cross chuckled loudly beside her, raising his glass in a mock toast to modernizing old houses and outdated, unstable little sisters, prompting the entire table to burst into cruel, condescending laughter. They openly ridiculed me as a pathetic, freeloading sibling who lived on charity, while Ethan sat beside Victoria in cowardly, gutless silence, staring blankly at his plate, refusing to say a single word in defense of his younger sister in front of these strangers. When Victoria brought out a tiny, insultingly cheap grocery store cupcake with a single lit candle sticking out of its center, forcing the mocking crowd to sing a quick, enthusiasm-lacking version of Happy Birthday, I felt something deep inside me break. Not with sorrow, but with absolute fiery resolve. The cruel insults, the stolen funds, and the public humiliation no longer possessed the power to hurt my spirit. They had merely burned away the last remnants of my naive hesitation, foolish tolerance, and false guilt. I looked at the flickering candle flame, closed my eyes, and made a fierce, unshakable wish that would forever alter the course of our lives. Blowing out the tiny light under a chorus of polite, lukewarm applause. The moment the last guest departed at 10 o'clock that evening, and Victoria retreated upstairs to take a long bath, I quietly retrieved my smartphone from my linen apron pocket and dialed Phoenix, Arizona. When Aunt Clara answered, her steady voice cutting through the quiet night air, I spoke with a rock-solid, crystal-clear tone that carried no tears, no fear,
and no remaining doubt in my heart. Aunt Clara, I have gathered every single piece of evidence we need. The micro camera videos, the bank records, and the secret recording. I stated plainly into the receiver. Please come to Denver tomorrow morning. It is time to start the war, dismantle her web of lies, and take back my life, once and for all, in the light of day. The next morning dawned gray and stormy over Denver. But inside my spirit, a radiant, warm sun had finally begun to rise with unshakable strength and clarity. At precisely 9 o'clock, while Victoria was lounging in her sweatpants in the kitchen, expecting her usual morning coffee service, a loud, commanding knock resonated against the heavy wooden front door. I walked past the kitchen table with an unhurried, graceful step, opened the door wide, and greeted my late mother's sister, Aunt Clara Sterling. Standing tall at 58 years old, clad in an unblemished, tailored charcoal gray pantsuit, with a classic leather briefcase in hand, and her silver-streaked hair styled flawlessly, Clara radiated the formidable, unyielding aura of an elite estate attorney. She stepped across the threshold, her sharp eyes sweeping over the living room, before locking on to Victoria, who had emerged from the kitchen with a hostile, arrogant scowl. "Who on earth are you, and why are you barging into my house?" Victoria snapped defensively, her voice laced with sharp, ugly venom. Clara offered a cold, razor-sharp smile that could freeze lava, setting her heavy leather briefcase firmly onto the dining table. "I am Clara Sterling, senior partner at Sterling & Associates, legal counsel and aunt to Maya Miller," Clara declared in a booming, ironclad voice that echoed through the entire house. "And according to the binding legal deed, you are standing in Maya's house, a parasitic trespasser living on borrowed time before justice arrives in this house." Ethan stumbled down the staircase, rubbing his sleepy eyes, freezing in absolute terror as Aunt Clara opened her heavy briefcase and pulled out a stack of binding legal documents and a sleek digital tablet. Without waiting for a response, Clara plugged the tablet into an external speaker on the table, looking Ethan straight in the eye with deep, mournful pity. "Before you say another foolish word to defend your wife, nephew, I suggest you listen very closely to this," Clara commanded coldly, pressing the play button on the screen. The quiet dining room was suddenly filled with the crystalline sound of Victoria's voice, captured 3 nights earlier during her 2 a.m. telephone conversation with Julian Cross. Ethan's face drained of all color as he heard his wife purring affectionately to her lover, openly boasting about using him as an oblivious, useful idiot to manipulate Maya, forge psychiatric reports, and steal the house title. Victoria shrieked in absolute panic, diving across the glass table to grab the device, but Clara easily blocked her with an outstretched hand as the recording played relentlessly on. Every cruel insult, every detailed step of the conspiracy to steal the $380,000, and Victoria's explicit plan to divorce Ethan and flee to Miami with Julian, echoed with brutal, undeniable clarity throughout the house, shattering Ethan's entire world into dust right before our eyes in absolute silence as his knees buckled beneath him on the floor. The echoing revelation hung in the air like a heavy hammer, shattering Ethan's long-standing denial into a million jagged pieces. For a terrifying second, my brother stood completely frozen on the hardwood floor, staring at Victoria as if she were an incomprehensible stranger, before a raw, primal roar of pure betrayal ripped from his throat. Stepping forward with a shaking hand, Ethan delivered a sharp, stinging slap across Victoria's cheek, the crack echoing like thunder through the quiet dining room as she stumbled backward against the mahogany wall, clutching her reddened face in utter shock. "Get out of this house!" Ethan screamed, his voice breaking violently as tears of deep humiliation poured down his pale cheeks. "Get out of my family's life right now!" Victoria's eyes burned with a venomous, animalistic fury, her mouth twisting into a grotesque sneer as she opened her mouth to hurl another toxic threat. But I stepped forward smoothly, placing myself directly between her and my parents' cedar cabinet, meeting her hostile glare with an iron, diamond-hard gaze that radiated total authority throughout the room. "You have precisely 5 minutes to collect your personal clothing and leave my property, Victoria," I stated softly, my voice carrying a quiet, lethal composure that brooked zero argument or hesitation. "If you are still standing on my lawn when the timer hits 0, Aunt Clara will immediately submit this recording to the district attorney to arrest you for grand larceny, fraud, and felony document forgery." Terrified by the undeniable strength of the legal trap closing around her, Victoria hissed a final venomous curse, turned on her designer heels, and fled up the staircase, her heels pounding furiously against the floorboards as she stuffed 2 suitcases with her belongings before slamming the front door behind her forever. As the echoes of her sudden departure faded into the heavy morning air, the artificial illusion that had governed our home for 6 months completely dissolved into dust. Ethan collapsed onto his knees right in the middle of the living room floor, burying his face in his trembling, calloused hands, sobbing uncontrollably like a broken, frightened child. "Maya, please. I didn't know about Julian. I swear to God I didn't know about the psychiatric papers." He wept bitterly, looking up at me with tear-stained eyes full of raw, pathetic desperation. I was so stupid, so blinded by my own failure. Please forgive me, little sister. I stood above him in my linen apron, looking down at my 31-year-old brother without a single flicker of cruelty, but also without the soft, naive submission that had almost destroyed my life and home. "I love you because you are my brother, Ethan, and a part of me will always cherish the boy who grew up beside me." I spoke gently, my voice steady, firm, and unyielding as granite. But I respect myself first now. Sibling love does not mean I will ever allow you to destroy my life or erase my parents' legacy again. Seeing the unshakable boundary in my eyes, Ethan lowered his head in silent, profound acceptance, realizing that his days of hiding behind cowards' excuses were officially over. I took a deep, measured breath and laid out the 4 non-negotiable conditions for his continued presence in my house, setting a strict, uncompromising framework for his ultimate redemption. First, you will vacate the master bedroom immediately and move your belongings into the small rear guest room facing the damp yard. I stated clearly, my tone calm and authoritative. Second, you will find a real job by Monday. Not a glamorous venture, but honest labor at a hardware store or driving delivery shifts. And every single dollar you earn will go toward a structured repayment plan to restore the $380,000 you allowed to be stolen. Third, you will attend mandatory weekly psychological therapy to address the deep-seated insecurity and weakness that allowed you to betray your own sister. And fourth, you will help me physically restore this house to its original beauty, hanging our parents' photographs back where they belong, in every room. Ethan nodded frantically through his tears, pressing his forehead against the hardwood floorboards as he made his solemn vow.
I will do everything, Maya, he sobbed with genuine, humbled remorse. I will spend the rest of my life earning your trust back. For the first time in 3 years, I saw a tiny, genuine spark of a real man beginning to emerge from his brokenness in this house.
By early afternoon, Aunt Clara's formidable legal network sprang into decisive action, bringing the full weight of Colorado state law down upon the predatory conspiracy. Aunt Clara arrived at the house accompanied by lawyer Robert Harrison, a distinguished, sharp-minded specialist in financial fraud and estate law, alongside 2 uniformed police officers and a forensic financial investigator. Standing in my sunlit driveway beneath a clearing Denver sky, lawyer Harrison presented a formal court injunction and an emergency asset freezing order, authorizing the immediate impoundment of the white Porsche Cayenne luxury SUV sitting in my garage. A $140,000 vehicle Victoria had brazenly purchased using funds drained directly from my late parents' life insurance account. As the heavy tow truck hooked up the luxury vehicle, lawyer Harrison carefully reviewed the mountain of evidence Chloe and I had compiled, his professional eyes widening in quiet admiration at the meticulous audio files, micro-camera footage, and forged medical affidavits. Miss Miller, this is one of the most comprehensive, airtight cases of financial fraud and psychological coercion I have ever witnessed, lawyer Harrison noted with deep, genuine respect, closing his heavy leather folder. We are filing formal criminal charges with the district attorney's office today for grand larceny, identity theft, and conspiracy. Victoria and Julian Cross are not going to walk away from this. They are facing severe state prison time without any possibility of a light settlement or an easy exit from justice in this state. 3 nights later, the final, desperate act of Victoria's predatory scheme played out under the dark cover of a moonless midnight. Unable to accept her total defeat and desperate to retrieve the hidden paper trail and stolen jewelry she had left behind, Victoria returned to my house, accompanied by Julian Cross and a shady, disgraced former notary public named Albert Fisher. Standing quietly in the darkened hallway, I heard the subtle metallic scrape of lock-picking tools probing my front door handle. Instead of panicking, I calmly engaged the heavy, reinforced secondary deadbolt I had installed 2 days prior, stepping back into the shadows as I activated Chloe's high-definition live stream security feed directly to my smartphone while dialing 911.
Denver emergency. What is your location?" the operator whispered calmly through my ear. "There are 3 intruders currently attempting to force entry into my home," I reported in a cool, steady voice, broadcasting the crystal-clear video feed directly to the police dispatch unit. Within 4 short minutes, silent red and blue emergency lights illuminated the front lawn as 3 police cruisers converged on the property, catching the 3 intruders completely red-handed on my porch with break-in tools and forged notary stamps. Victoria shrieked in furious disbelief as officers slammed her against the brick pillar, snapping steel handcuffs around her wrists alongside Julian and the fake notary. As they were dragged away into the night, I stood peacefully on my porch, feeling the cool night air wash over me, knowing the nightmare was finally over, forever. 4 months later, standing inside the sunlit, wood-paneled courtroom of the Denver District Court, I watched the final curtain fall upon the dark chapter that had almost consumed my entire existence. Presiding over the court, Judge Evans delivered a stern, unyielding verdict that brought complete justice to our family's long-suffering spirit. Victoria Miller was sentenced to 7 full years in state prison for grand larceny, financial fraud, and felony document forgery, while her co-conspirator, Julian Cross, received a 5-year sentence for felony fraud. Standing in her bright orange jumpsuit, stripped of her polished facade, arrogant demeanor, and expensive designer clothes, Victoria cast one final defeated glance toward me from the defense table before being led away in heavy steel handcuffs by court bailiffs. Stepping out through the massive glass doors of the courthouse beside Aunt Clara and my best friend Chloe, I lifted my head toward the vibrant, unblemished blue Denver sky, taking my very first deep, unobstructed breath of true freedom in years. The heavy, suffocating cloud of anxiety, betrayal, and silent grief that had weighed upon my shoulders since my parents' sudden passing finally dissolved into thin air. Looking back at the grand stone pillars of justice behind me, I did not feel a bitter surge of vengeful triumph. Instead, I felt a quiet, weightless peace settling over my soul. Knowing that truth had prevailed, my parents' memory remained pristine, and my future was entirely mine to design once again. Returning home to our sanctuary, my brother Ethan threw himself into fulfilling his 4 non-negotiable conditions of redemption with a humbled, quiet determination that slowly earned back my respect and trust over time. Every morning at 6 o'clock, he put on his work uniform and headed out to work his day shift as a sales associate at a local hardware store, followed by grueling evening delivery shifts for Amazon Flex to pay back every stolen cent of the $380,000. When he came home late at night, exhausted, smelling of lumber, sweat, and hard labor, he did not complain. Instead, he rolled up his sleeves to help me carefully strip away every cold, metallic drape Victoria had installed, restoring the warm ivory linen curtains my mother had hand-stitched during her pregnancy. Together, we repainted the living room walls in warm, inviting tones, hanging our parents' framed photographs back in their rightful places, restoring the soul of our childhood home piece by piece. On quiet Sunday afternoons, Ethan sat beside me on the porch, sharing his therapeutic progress and reflecting deeply on the cowardly blindness that had led him astray. Our relationship was no longer built upon naive sibling tolerance or fragile, hollow illusions, but reconstructed upon an unshakable foundation of mutual respect, clear boundaries, and honest accountability, allowing two mature siblings to heal together in the bright daylight of truth, accountability, and love. In the quiet, peaceful evenings following my architectural work, I sat at the formal dining table beneath the warm amber chandelier, undertaking a deeply symbolic art project that would forever transform my relationship with trauma, betrayal, and grief. Gathered before me were the golden-trimmed porcelain fragments of my mother's $25,000 Limoges dinnerware, which I had carefully collected from the kitchen floor 4 months earlier. Instead of discarding the broken pieces or concealing their fractures, I meticulously practiced the traditional Japanese art of kintsugi, joining the shattered ceramic edges back together using a natural lacquer dusted with pure, shimmering gold powder. For weeks, my hands worked with patient, loving precision, tracing every crack and jagged break with radiant veins of solid gold, turning what was once a tragic scene of destruction into a breathtaking masterpiece of resilience, strength, and grace. When the final dish was restored, the porcelain set rested proudly inside the cedar cabinet, its shimmering golden seams catching the sunlight like a constellation of stars. The restored Limoges dinnerware no longer represented fragile perfection, buried grief, or painful betrayal. It stood as a proud, tangible testament to my own journey, a radiant reminder that a human spirit, though fractured by betrayal and pain, can be put back together to become immeasurably stronger, more valuable, and infinitely more beautiful than before. Every golden seam tells a story of survival, proving that our deepest wounds can become our greatest sources of beauty. As peace settled permanently over our home, Aunt Clara, lawyer Robert Harrison, and I channeled our hard-won victory into a lasting legacy that would protect others from experiencing the nightmare I had endured. Together, we officially registered a certified 501c3 nonprofit organization named the Miller Legacy Foundation, establishing its primary headquarters directly within the spacious, sunlit walls of our 3-bedroom suburban home. With Chloe managing our digital infrastructure and lawyer Harrison offering pro bono legal counsel, our foundation turned our parents' home into a safe sanctuary and legal guidance center for young adults and women facing severe family financial exploitation, domestic coercion, and property theft. We transformed the spacious master bedroom into a quiet counseling suite and legal research library, providing free forensic accounting, emergency housing resources, and court advocacy for those whose voices had been silenced by abusive relatives. Over the next 18 months, our foundation successfully helped 33 vulnerable individuals reclaim their stolen assets, escape toxic domestic environments, and rebuild their independent lives with dignity, freedom, and renewed hope. What had once been a dark, agonizing battlefield of greed and deception had blossomed into a
beacon of hope and healing for the entire Denver community, ensuring that my parents' legacy of unconditional love, hard work, and generosity would live on for generations to come. Through this foundation, their loving memory continues to shield and uplift the innocent every single day. Now, as twilight settles gently over the Denver skyline, I sit peacefully on the wooden porch swing of my childhood home, holding a warm cup of herbal tea while listening to the soft rustle of evening leaves in the yard. In the front garden below, the vibrant red rose bushes my father planted decades ago are blooming in magnificent, fragrant abundance, their delicate petals glowing softly under the starlit Colorado sky. Inside, I can hear the quiet, rhythmic sound of Ethan preparing dinner in the kitchen, his voice humming a peaceful melody that mingles with the gentle evening breeze. Looking out at the quiet, friendly neighborhood, a profound, weightless smile touches my lips as I reflect deeply upon the extraordinary journey that brought me to this moment of complete, beautiful rebirth. I have learned that true healing does not require us to erase our past scars or pretend that the storm never raged. Rather, it asks us to embrace our broken pieces and weave them into a life of purpose, courage, and unconditional self-respect. If my journey carries one enduring message for anyone navigating the dark shadows of betrayal, let it be this: true strength never lies in avoiding pain or keeping a false peace, but in standing unshakably in your own truth, knowing that no one on this earth can ever silence your voice or steal your inherent dignity.